think we're live. Yeah, they seem that way. Howdy, Howlers. It's Sako Toomey, also known as Cass Voit. I write horror, and I'm a witch, and I'm a graphic designer, and sometimes I combine those three things. Today, I have a special guest.
Hello!
Would you like to tell the populace who you might be?
Of course. I am Allegra Pescatore, author of Where Shadows Lie and NaCl Eye of the Storm. I'm also here on YouTube as Plot Mom. I'm a long-time writer, role player, bizarrely bouncy person who generally can be found with a dog by her side.
Yay!
Right back there.
Awesome. Okay, I have questions that I can ask you. It will probably take forever. All right. First off, do you use an existing game system, or do you freeform, or?
Okay, so I roleplay a lot in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
So I do tabletop roleplay.
Okay.
Every Monday night, I'm part of Deranged and Questing, a 5th edition D&D podcast hosted by Andy Pelican over on Twitch and YouTube. It's a ton of fun, but that's just like my tabletop or RPG. I also take part in a variety of games, just locally and privately, but as far as writing is concerned, I do most of my role-playing on text-based forums.
Sure.
Usually like fan forums from various different, author worlds. Although more and more we're doing it in original worlds.
Oh, that's thus the converting it to noveldom is like way easier because you're already doing the world building, like it's all set up for you, and then you just play in it. You
exactly.
Make your own sandbox, right?
I tend to get really, really, really annoyed about like world building inconsistencies in other people's worlds. So after I roleplay in one for a while, I'm just like, but why this? And why not that? And how? And I tend to like really annoy my admin because I'll create really odd characters or look into really bizarre little pieces of science. And they're just like, you're giving me too much trouble. Don't make me moderate this.
I'm really sorry that you can't make this, but yes, watch it in the replay for sure.
Yes.
Absolutely. We got two, because I've been role-playing since I was 7 years old. And excellent. I also wonder, on a similar note, do you DM these games? Okay.
Some of them. So I have been DMing since high school for tabletop.
Right.
I've run games in all sorts of different systems. I most recently ran a game in the world of Where Shadows Lie. Ooh. With a group of people to flesh out the history, and they would get bonus experience points if they could break my world building. So their goal was to do the most wild stuff they could come up with and explore in bizarre directions to try to break my world building.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I DM a lot.
Yeah. So which are your favorite systems to run or play in?
So absolutely, hands down, my favorite system I've ever found is Powered by the Apocalypse. So Monster of the Week and other variants. I really love how narrative it is, how story-driven and character-driven it is. And I think it's because it's the kind of stories I like to tell. With, D&D and Pathfinder, I love them. I play them. I have a great amount of fun doing that, but I get very much lost in the, rule minutia. Yeah. And I have a tendency then to want to min-max and then to, course correct so far that I make characters who are completely unreal, completely broken characters in either direction, because I was like, oh no, I don't want to make a really efficient character. I'm going to make this ridiculous, strange character. And fortunately my gaming group is wonderful. We're actually starting a new little special thing for subscribers, which is the Incompetence Guild, which are characters who are purposefully built to be just wrong.
Nice.
Just wrong.
That sounds a lot of fun. Holy cannoli. So when you start your world building, how do you go about like setting up a sandbox for people to play in?
So I have a really strong belief that a good DM doesn't go in with a plot, they go in with a setting.
Correct.
So for me, I try to build worlds that have through lines of logic. I really want my players to be able to, if this, then that, my worlds. So I try to start with just a few core concepts. For my Where Shadows Lie world, where I did my last game, I set it at the magic school. So I decided that what I wanted for the world building was very, very clear, clear rules as far as what was available for them as resources, what places and challenges they could face. So my world building started from this geography up. I built this island. I built the places in it. I populated those places according to the sort of people who would end up in these various locations. Okay, well, there's a market where minimal police presence is there. Well, of course, the black market people are going to end up there, and the, shadier side of society are going to end up there. And if someone wanted to get away and do research all on their own, they'd go to this desolate area where no students are supposed to go. So I can fill that spot with, weird old hermits in the woods and chance encounters. So pretty much all for games or writing, I start with the geography.
That's a great idea. Well, wrong window. What sort of stories do you like to run with people? I know you said like your stuff is powered by the apocalypse, right? But is it like that token, or like are there a series of genres, or?
So Powered by the Apocalypse is just a gaming system, and actually has a lot of different genres.
Okay.
But most of my games tend to be fantasy. I'm a fantasy girl through and through. Sure. But yes, I have a very hard time sticking to a specific genre, and my world building very, very rarely likes to have a direct analog to like our history or our world. So in Where Shadows Lie, we have a on the surface Renaissance culture, but they're right on the cusp of an industrial revolution because of magic. But also like they live in a really, really rainy country. So even though they have a fairly European aesthetic, rice is the predominant grain and fish are everywhere. And it's just, again, kind of most of my world building doesn't come from genre tropes or anything. It comes from this idea that if you set up a really strong ecology, you can then, if this, then that, your way into a culture by figuring out what that culture had available to them to, work with and how they would develop based on the resources they had.
Absolutely. So do your players help you world build? Is that like the goal? Or are you like, I'm going to make sure this is as top notch before they see it as possible?
A bit of both. I try to make it as internally consistent as possible before I get going. But as I said, the goal of my role-playing group is to poke holes at everything I do aggressively and deliberately. So they tend to go off script and like, oh, you're supposed to go to this desert here. Well, how about we go to this rainforest instead that you don't have built up quite as much?
Sure.
And I love that. I love it when I can on the fly do world building because I laid the foundation work that I can extrapolate from. And even better when my players will be like, well, because of this, then this has to be true, and it is. I already have it in my notes, and they were actually able to extrapolate. That just tells me that I did my job correctly.
Right. Do you use a wiki, or do you handwrite everything, or?
I have pages and pages and pages of notes in a Google Doc, all color coded. I have spreadsheets, but most of my world building lives in my head. I know it's really bad, and I should have it all codified and written down.
I know how difficult and how making a story Bible or making a wiki for your series and stuff like that can be really daunting and really time consuming. So I kind of get just memorizing everything and you're like, bring it on. And
yeah. I'm also a fan of despite what I'm saying here, I'm actually a fan of minimal world building.
Oh, really?
I'm a minimalist. I want to world build what the characters see and hear, and I want the structure and skeleton of my world building to be absolutely, put together. So I want the core foundational gimmies to be in every part of society. I thought that, Brandon Sanderson does this really, really well, like in Mistborn, how the nobility doesn't wear metal because metal is magic and can be used by their magic, allomancy, and just this idea that the core differences in a fantasy world that makes it a fantasy world should go through the entirety of society. So you don't need that many. And as long as those are thought out well, we will populate the rest based on what our understanding of humanity is. So I don't feel like I need to explore every single nuance, tiny little village, tiny little custom. I want to only explore what my characters are seeing. And all I need to do that are the core foundational things to be solid, and then be able to just riff off of them for what I need in an actual story. I think that world building is the absolute antithesis to actually getting a book written.
It certainly can be. And that's one of the reasons why what I do is technically fan fiction, because what world building I do based on roughly on a system that already exists. I base it off of White Wolf stuff.
Absolutely.
So
that's a great way to do it. I wish more people, that's why I think we started this conversation about me coming on here, is we're both role players and we both have a love of role play, and it teaches you to write because you don't have this heavy weight, this burden of, I have to create an interesting world. That's a big undertaking. It's a whole world. It's complicated. It's difficult. It's time consuming. And I'd much rather get a good story in a world that isn't as interesting than know that someone spent 20 years on world building but never wrote anything.
I know that super well. I know a lot of people who fell into that hole, for sure.
Yes, it's a super deep hole.
It went DM happy and built their own world and all of that jazz.
Yeah.
And to the detriment of his story.
Absolutely. My kind of rule of thumb is if I get a really cool world building idea and I'm like, okay, I need to follow this. I can't rest. I can't sleep until I get this down on paper. I want to explore all of this. I get a blank piece of paper. I write the idea in the center. And then I give myself a 2-minute timer. And I write as much as I can on that piece of paper for 2 minutes. And I put that piece of paper in a binder and I don't touch it again.
That is a good limit. Because otherwise you get sucked in and you never find your way out.
And sometimes those 2 minutes are really all you need. All the really good iconic ideas are there in that initial burst of inspiration. I had one for Where Shadows Lie series. I had this moment of realization that this country, it rains all the time. And that rain had to be significant for every aspect of society. Because if you have, like, the weather is going to be incredibly impactful. So I gave myself 2 minutes, and I remember just doing rain and rivers and rice paddies and rice paper. And I just went all this like strange little tangent of all the things that rain touches. And it became foundational to probably like 2/3 of the book. And I got all that in 2 minutes. Like, right. I could have spent 10 years on that aspect, but I didn't need to. And most of the time, people just kind of finagle the same way when you edit while you're writing. You'll spend forever on commas, and then there's no story.
That actually leads into another question that I had. Let me see if I can find it. Do you edit as you play, or do you like zero draft it and go back? Or
so the way I write as a co-author is basically roleplay. We exchange, we go back and forth, tagging each other out. When we are zero drafting, we do almost no editing. Because it very much is discovery writing. We don't know what's going to happen next because what's happening is the, melding of our two minds, and neither of us can predict what will happen, 10 pages ahead.
Right.
This comes with problems.
Yes, it does.
So generally, we will not edit as we go on our zero draft, but we will edit as we go on our first draft. When we're actually doing the for real, this is writing that will end up in the book, we do a certain amount of content editing. We don't do line editing, but if something needs to be fixed,
like developmental.
Yes. Oftentimes we won't do the actual edit. We'll just leave each other comments and notes like, okay, we now know that the story isn't about this. It's about this other thing. I'm writing a lit RPG with one of my co-authors. And we started this book with the plot of a beta for this new gaming system is coming out. And if it does well, the company is being sold and everyone in it loses their jobs. And if it does poorly, the deal will crash.
Will fall through. And
so the story was crashing this beta, making it unplayable, breaking it, which was a fun story.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process of doing our zero draft, we discovered that the actual story was that the acting CEO's father, who was in a coma, was alive in the beta. And this whole beta was this like complex mind map to try to bring his consciousness back.
Oh.
And that's a completely different story. Now the story is how to save Charlie.
Right.
So we went from the story about breaking the beta to a story about saving Charlie, which means that the entire setup to, we have to break the beta is now
a completely different story. Same setting, completely different
story. So we now are in the process of we stopped writing our zero draft because we said we cannot get to the ending we need in the Save Charlie story with the beginning we had. So now we're going through and we're re-editing and we're rejiggering so that we can write a really efficient first draft that is about saving Charlie.
Cool.
So content, yes. Line edits, never.
Huh. Let's see. Do you use like standard story structures for game purposes, or do you like kind of rearrange your RP to fit?
So it depends on whether it will become a book or not.
Do you RP with the intent of putting it in a book?
Often, yes. Depending on where we do it. If it's, tabletop, no, usually. Although my tabletop group that poked holes in my story did end up being part of the history of the world. So they are like there in the book, like their names are dropped, their characters are there in the history and the like found letters and things like that.
That's cool.
But if I'm just doing a tabletop RPG, no, I don't follow a specific story structure because my kind of philosophy is It's about having fun, and all rules and all story structure can go out the window if it's not fun.
And that's how I specifically run one-shots. You do the 1-2-2-1 system, which works for story writing too. But for one-shots that are like 2 hours to 4 hours long, and the goal is for them to have fun. If they need to hit a point, make it easy for them to hit the point.
Exactly.
Otherwise, it's like you sit and spin tires for 20 minutes. And if you're actually performing, like you're doing it online or you're doing it in front of a crowd or whatever, then that's 20 minutes that the people will have chance to walk away.
Exactly.
Definitely be watching the replay. Can't stay. Have karaoke, of course. And you have karaoke in like 10 minutes. I get it. I will probably stop in after this. Let's see. Did that. Does it, the idea of playing with the intent of publishing, does that, or novelization rather, does that change the way that you play?
Yes.
It
does.
How does it?
There's a lot more planning outside of the text. There's a lot more talking and thinking of things in terms of storylines, not just scenes. Because most of the time when you're doing text-based, forum-based roleplay, very much everything is scene by scene, and you don't necessarily know where those scenes are going. Right. Now, I naturally am a story-based writer. Even before I was publishing, I would have these giant arcs and have like commitments from players to hit these different points. I'm kind of famous for it. I wrote 250,000 words on a site one year of this giant big plot arc for just one character.
Yeah.
So, it's a novel.
And then some.
And then some.
Yeah.
But as far as the book, the authors who are my co-authors, when we do just random roleplay, it tends to very much be, this is practice for the novel. We are running through different scenarios. We are running through alternative AUs, as it were, of if this happens, then this happens. If that happens, then this other thing happens. And a lot of times, those will spark completely different stories or spark in different directions. For example,
for like the beta thing, right?
Yes. I have a character in Where Shadows Lie. Her name is Eleanor. She's the protagonist. And Eleanor has been the character who I've been writing for the longest. I've been writing her since I was like 12. She's been in my head for a very long time. Every time I join an RP site, I create a version of Eleanor.
Sure.
She's my go-to, character that I have on every single site, and she's very different in every single site. So I got her onto this latest site that I was fairly active on, and she becomes this wildly different character because different things happen to her. There's some core things. She always has something traumatic happen to her as a child. And it always makes her a little bit of a weirdo and a loner. But apart from that, it's very variable. And so this character diverged so far and became such a different person that eventually it got to the point where we had this amazing plot line that we wanted to turn into a book. So we renamed her and we stuck her in a book. Now she's Lonnie in NaCl, Eye of the Storm, the second book I published. So my books have the same character at the core. They're indescribably different. They're not the same person at all.
Right, but they're all stemmed from your childhood, like
from this character archetype. Yes. Yeah. And then I'm doing it again. The same character branched off in yet a different direction into Sky for my Phalanx books that are going to be coming out next year.
Oh.
And the difference is astonishing, and the difference is entirely based on roleplay and what happened to these characters through roleplay in a different world that has nothing to do with the books that they ended up in.
Right.
But, in one, she's a very kind of naive and sheltered royalty. In another, she's a literal hermit that stomps around a boat yelling obscenities. And in another, she's like this weird little changeling fairy child out in the woods with wolves and fairies.
Yep.
Like totally different. And because of RP, they all started out in the same place.
I have similar stories. Absolutely.
Who's yours? Who's your character?
The one that I like putting into different universes is his name is Renan Suntao. He started out as insert fairy type vampire here, you know.
Excellent.
And then he got thrown into the World of Darkness, and then he got thrown into Harry Potter, and then he got thrown into Star Wars, and then he got thrown into there was the one where he was a high school student that was basically a serial killer that was selling the bodies of teenage girls to necrophiliacs.
Okay.
So I brought in this horrific like story to this like online, you know, forum RP. And I guess I should have talked it over with the people there.
The reason that NACL Eye of the Storm is a book is because, at least in part, because a thread was pulled for breaking the rules and being a little too intense, and we were very salty about it, so we wrote a book about being salty. Called it Salt. No, but for me, let's see, Eleanor has been in Lord of the Rings, in Wheel of Time, in a historically accurate ancient Rome RP.
Oh, those are so fun.
Black Jewels trilogy by Anne Bishop RP. And, oh God, many others.
Many others. Those are like, God, it's just, those are the best characters because they're all like, I even threw them into X-Men at one point. Like it's the same guy. It is, but
it's like that kind
he has the same motivation. He has the same motivations. He has the same personality quirks and all of that jazz. But because different stuff happens to him, and he is in a different period in his life, and he is in a very like he's a, you know, the royal family doctor on a planet that was homebrew in Star Wars, right? Whereas he was like a mad scientist in like Kiasid sort of situation in World of Darkness. And parsing apart those personality quirks and figuring out how things affect that guy from different angles is an exercise that I think everyone should be able to play with.
It's like an internal battle of nature versus nurture.
It is.
You get a really good sense of who this character is always and what is dependent on what happens to them.
I often get questions about like character building and stuff like that. And I guess it's your turn. How do you build your characters? Do you basically just take Eleanor and then throw her into a situation and see how it molds her?
For RP, she's always my first. She's very rarely my last. I have a fairly large cast of characters in almost every site I'm in. I have a few core archetypes, and they are the like set of characters that have been in my head since I was a child. Who are basically the core protagonists of Where Shadows Lie. I have Eleanor, Gabriel, and Faye. They are my three babies who I toss in. Eleanor is always in over her head, way too, both way too optimistic and way too realist for any situation. Gabriel is always passionate about something and very down to earth and kind of shabby and just kind of does his thing with a genuine good heart and gets into trouble a lot. And Faye is always just a raging asshole. No matter where she is, she will be whatever that world's version of prejudice is.
Right. And it's a matter of the setting at that point that makes her what kind of asshole she's going to be.
But the nature is she is a bitter and mostly thinks about whatever group she's part of. That's all that matters to her. Mm-hmm. The rest can burn.
Right.
That's always the same. But beyond those three, it's very variable. I usually start with a kind of very generalized notion, and I really like the, what's the word? Oh, I had it just last night. When the unlikely attractor or something.
Oh, sure. Oh.
So two things that shouldn't come together, like an ice cream shop owner in a desert.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, how do you make ice cream in a medieval-ish setting in the middle of a desert?
Yeah.
Things like that. And I try to riff off of this strange attractor. That's the thing. I like oddball characters. I've always had a love for them. Generally, I'll start with a tone and a feel, and I'll get kind of just write a few pages, and then I'll build out to try to develop that tone and feel, and like work backwards from it to determine how it could become. I have a character, Mo. He is the hero and villain of NaCl.
Anti-hero?
No, both hero and villain. He's very, very specifically not an anti-hero. Oh. He's all-out villainous, but also genuinely heroic. It's a very strange character, but he is an exercise in the bizarre. Every time he is on the page, I'm pulling every bit of weirdness out of myself that I can and sticking it on. He wears these like flamboyantly colored clothes and sequins and has an ego out to here and just loves non sequiturs and genuinely seems crazy.
You're right.
And I had to figure out who he was behind the scenes. So I worked out why someone would be this extreme of a weirdo.
Right.
And so I gave him a quite tragic backstory of he is someone who is so powerful, his powers are basically useless. He can teleport, but he can't teleport across a room. He can teleport to another planet. His power is just too big to be useful. And he can see the future, but he can't see the future 5 minutes from now. He can only see the future 500 years from now.
Right.
So he's this person who's completely lost in the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of worked backwards into this very eclectic person who's not really worried about what anyone thinks of him in the present because nothing matters if it's not 500 years in the future.
Like nothing matters. Yeah. I gotcha. That's a really interesting way of coming at it too, is working backwards, like having the effect of whatever it is that you first having the sandbox, yes, and then throw in a blank, basically a character, and then poke at him until he makes a personality, basically.
Pretty much.
Yeah, that's a really cool way of coming at it. So RPing to co-write, does it help your word count to work with the mindset that you're RPing?
I wouldn't say that the mindset is what helps the word count. I would say that it's actually just having another person there, because
it does help.
They are waiting on you to be able to write. So there's that pressure. You are excited to see what they'll do. Mm-hmm. There's that helps you write. And also just neither of you know where the story is going, so you're actually discovering it together. Mm-hmm. And it's incredibly exciting and dynamic. And so the words pour out. And I think that the practice of forum-based roleplay does increase your word count. because you are learning to write a set amount of words every single time. You're learning to do it quickly, efficiently, and to not think too hard about what you're writing. Like, it's fine if it's not high literature. You're just trying to entertain and to move a story forward. It's
the moving the story forward part. Not everybody does that, which is not all role players do that.
No.
Which has been trying in my past.
Yes. My pet peeve is characters who will write, people who will write a 2,000 word post in which nothing happens.
In which nothing happens.
And which I have nothing to play off of. But you learn to play off of everything. That's the thing. You learn to make up for that. And it's really, I found impactful for my own writing too, because sometimes I'll write myself into a corner and be like, I don't know how to get out of it. And then I just mentally move it aside and say, well, if someone else had written this, how would I bounce back from it? And almost 100% of the time I manage it immediately as soon as I make that mental shift.
That's a really astounding shift to think about, is basically like, well, this person past me has done this post and totally walked us into a wall. So,
and I can't delete it. The wall already exists.
The wall already exists. Yeah, exactly.
I have to find a way to, get my, chisel and hammer and get my way through it, or climb over it, or, summon a giant to kick it down. I don't care. It needs to go.
And sometimes all three.
Yes.
Sometimes, what's the worst that can happen? Sometimes I will make a list of the terrible things that could happen that will take the story into a new direction.
Yep. It's a really smart thing.
And not just for books and stuff like that. Definitely for books, because basically I'm RPing by myself. That is what
writing is, essentially.
And then, but train of thought. Oh no. So the idea that that frame of mind is key in moving forward, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to not just, and as a role player, it's not just role playing, that if you get into that role playing sort of mindset while you're writing normal stuff, I think for me, it helps because, you have the pressure from the other person. Pressure and inspiration, I think, is all both equal parts the thing. So essentially what I'm doing with BC Brown, we're co-writing a book, and we're both avid role players.
Excellent.
So we're not RPing with each other, but we're bouncing ideas off of each other, and it's instantaneous story making.
It is.
To have two brains, if my idea isn't top notch, it's okay, we're moving on. We're a steamroller that just gets shit done, and then we're unsure how the actual writing part is going to happen. We're doing the planning stage right now.
Well, if you need my help, I'm absolutely always thrilled to bring other authors in to see how we work and all of that. We get we write about, when we're on a roll, we write about a novella every 2 weeks.
So this was going to be one of the last things I asked you, but what do you think of Milwordy? Are you familiar with it?
Yes, I am familiar with it. I have a very complicated relationship with the idea of fast drafting. So most of my work is fast drafted. I think that fast drafting is a wonderful thing to do and that everyone should try it at least once. I think that high word counts are really, really valuable because you can't edit what you don't write, and you can't become a fast writer if you don't write fast. It's just one of those, I do think that the pressure of writing that many words per month for an entire year is likely to cause more burnout and more hating the work then it will necessarily benefit people. I think there is a point where the returns start diminishing in association with the effort. So I'm not doing it. I strongly believe that it's better to try to work up a habit where, you start with writing 250 words a day, and then you write 300, and slowly working your way until you get to the point where you are writing enough words a day to meet your deadlines and to write the stories you want to tell, but that isn't pushing you so far that the writing starts becoming quite a bit worse.
Right.
Like, there is a sweet spot. For me, that's about 2,500 to 3,000 words if I'm writing alone, and anywhere up to the 8,000 word mark a day if I'm writing with someone else.
Yeah.
After that, my quality goes down, my productivity goes down, I make mistakes. It's not good writing, and it's frustrating, and it's teaching me to hate the writing. I don't want to hate my writing. I want to go into writing every day thinking, this is fun, this is what I love, this is what I cannot get enough of.
RP is supposed to be fun.
Yes.
Right. And because my writing is derivative of my role plays, my writing is supposed to be fun. And when it stops being fun, that's when I'm like, new story.
Yep. I'm the child of two working artists. I've grown up in around a creative household where creativity has equaled the food on our table. Creativity is something that must be pulled out of the bag every single day to survive. Actually, I'm going to have my parents on my YouTube channel this Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern to talk about that. Talk about finding creativity when it's your job. But I do think that the moment that you allow yourself to set unreasonable expectations and goals for yourself, you are signing your creative death warrant. The same thing you were talking about, role play. One of the things I love about role play is that you stop having an expectation of a story going a certain way. You stop having an expectation that you have control over this and everything will be exactly the way you want it. And the moment you stop having this sense of this must be this way for success to be achieved, you can find the joy in it again. It becomes something that you discover. It becomes play, and that will have such a, for me, more higher effect on my productivity than a giant goal.
Yeah, I feel very, very similar. Absolutely. Wow.
No, expectations, I think, and putting those expectations on yourself. Super, super great if you have a problem producing. But once you are reasonably producing and have a reasonable role, I do not think it has as much value as people think it does.
Yeah. It's one thing when it's a month and it's 50,000 words. That's one thing. But
it's key. If you're writing 50,000 words in a month, you can't expect the book that comes out at the end to be good.
You can't expect it to be solid.
No.
Sure. No.
You set these I just went through this. I had to write a short story. Now, anyone who's read my books knows that being short and brief is not my thing. I write big books. I can't write a short story to save my life. I might just have to write one. And I spent all summer knowing I had to write this story and reading short stories by Ray Bradbury, short stories by all these amazing speculative fiction writers that were astonishing and deep and inspirational. And I realized that I had set myself this unrealistic expectation that I was going to write something inspirational. Boy, does that kill your ability to be productive. If you have set yourself up to write the next great American novel or to write something that makes someone cry or think or do anything, then how can you put a word on the page? What if it's the wrong word?
What if it's the wrong word? Yeah.
And the moment I decided I'm going to write a short story, Period. That's it. I'm not a good short story writer, so all I'm going to do is write a short story.
Mm-hmm. And if it happens to be good, then hooray.
Great.
Not,
if it doesn't,
no flack. Yeah.
Exactly. And guess what? I wrote a decent short story. Is it inspirational? Probably not. Is it still like moving? Yeah, it had character growth. It did all the things that I'm actually good at.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to write it the moment I gave myself permission for it not to be good. And I gave myself permission for it to be difficult.
I think that goes with creativity as like mandatory creativity, like across the board. You have to get rid of that perfectionism. You have to get rid of that, like, good enough for government work is how I put it. Right. So, because otherwise you're never going to meet a deadline.
No.
It's done. Move on.
Yep.
It's done. Move on. Like,
it is a snapshot in time of what you were able to do then. It does not define what you will do tomorrow. It doesn't, it is what it is. Period.
I have a dear friend who, she is on revision number 8, I think, right now, and has been working on it for years and years and years and years and years. And I'm like, at revision 8, like, that's basically a completely different book than what you started with. Like, the story is 100% different at that point. At what point does the anxiety, like, stop holding you back?
Yeah.
Like,
I have exactly this situation. My first book, Where Shadows Lie, took me 20 years to write. I rewrote it from scratch 5 times. Not a single word of the original has made it through. Hardly a plot point of the original has made it through.
Right.
And I am so glad I did, because the first draft was not. The first time I wrote it, it was not the story I wanted to tell. And the 4th draft I wrote wasn't the story I wanted to tell. I finally became a good enough writer to tell the story I wanted to tell. So I'm glad I took the time on that one. But I also had this very stark realization that I spent 20 years working on that. And it's had a lukewarm reception compared to the novel I spent 6 weeks writing.
Right, but it's because you spent those 20 years. It took you 6 weeks to write that.
Exactly. So I could spend a whole lot of time crying for the 20 years I spent working on this.
Crying, yeah.
Or, because I could have been published 10 years ago. Like, I could have started it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no point. It is what it is, and I got to tell the story I wanted. Is it perfect? No, I can still see, like, it has some Phantom Menace syndrome. There's lots of, like, discussions and politics. It has plenty of places where I wish I could have probably cut some words. I could have expanded here. I could have, like, there's so many things.
Sure.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It gave me something, and when I published, I had to make that decision. I am letting this go. I am saying this is it. This is all the time I can spend. This taught me what I needed to be taught.
That's how I feel about the book I just released.
And if I continue working on it, I will not learn anything new.
If I keep working on it, I will not learn anything new. I have learned all the things I need in order to write the series that I have been itching to write for decades. So now I have the skill set because I spent 11 years learning through this book.
Exactly.
Right. And now I still want people to enjoy the book.
Of course.
I put 11 years into it. I put a lot of effort into it.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, I don't know. I think it's kind of like illustration, right? I took 5 years converting my traditional skills to digital and still making it look traditional. It's completely digital, but it looks like it was done with paint.
Yeah.
but I had to take those 5 years to do studies, to do like practices, basically, of where you do picture after picture after picture after picture after picture, trying out new techniques that might have the end result that I want, maybe, possibly, maybe. And I think it's like that for music. It's like that for writing. And
the thing that a lot of people don't realize is anytime we practice these skills, it's practice. Are you role playing? You're practicing your writing.
Mm-hmm.
Are you randomly just playing with a friend, just messing around with music? You are playing music. It counts. And that's why like a lot of people are like, oh, you wrote 250,000 words on an RP site. Aren't you worried that you like wasted your time? No. I'm 250,000 words better writer than I was then.
Right.
I wouldn't have been able to write this last book in 6 weeks if I hadn't warmed up doing that.
Exactly.
It's all practice. There is no such thing as bad or wrong words. It might be the wrong word for that project. You may not be a good enough writer for this idea,
mm-hmm.
but all the words you put down on paper trying to get there
are worth it.
They're worth it. Every single one. I'm teaching a class on NaNoWriMo this year, and my biggest suggestion is anytime you're stuck, just break the fourth wall. Talk about why you're stuck. Keep writing until you write yourself out of the problem you had to begin with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's great. Holy crap. So when you play with other people, you said you play via forums.
Yes.
Usually. Is that like multi-paragraph or
yes.
like... That's awesome.
Absolutely. I will not join a forum that doesn't have a minimum word count because I've been burned too often by writing 3 paragraphs and having a single sentence response. And I can't stand that. It will infuriate me faster than almost any other thing. I want to be writing narrative. I want deep character dives. I want some depth to my role play.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And like I've done some faster form role play over like Discord and stuff like that.
Sure.
And it's fun. It's good, but it doesn't give me the same like heartfelt, yes, I am inspired that writing multi-paragraph does.
Right, exactly. Wow, that alone is inspiring. That's fantastic. Certainly, I have more questions. Do you play by... we were talking about making it a habit before. Do you play by schedule? Do you have like specific days that you sit down and do your thing? Or is it a daily thing? Is it a whenever you have a free moment? Or...
So I live a constant dance with my health. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and postural orthostatic tachycardia and fibro. So my life is a series of I'm okay, I'm not okay at all. Right. So I cannot have a regular set schedule. It is absolutely beyond me. I write at every moment I can write. And the reason I write every moment I can write is that I love writing. It's that I've worked very, very, very hard. Like there are parts of the writing business that I do not love and do anyways. The editing, the revision, the marketing, all of that stuff. I don't love it, but I do it. But the writing itself, I will not write if I cannot find a way to make myself excited about what I'm writing.
Sure.
So the first thing I do every time I have a free hour to write is I sit down with the scene I'm writing and try to figure out, why did I want to write this? What makes me giggling? You know that like you can't stop talking about a thing. It's the most exciting thing in the world. You want to just rant about it to whoever is around.
Right.
I start thinking about what I'm about to write, and I don't stop thinking about it until I'm that excited. Because the writing will be better, and I won't stop once I start. Like, then I'll just the words will flood out and I'm hyped up and I can go. And if I cannot get myself into that state, I do something writing tangential. I'll edit, I'll revise, I'll reread, I'll do world building. I will still work.
Mm-hmm.
I never just like, start watching YouTube videos. That won't hype me up.
Yeah.
But I will not actually type until I am excited about what I'm writing.
Ditto. I didn't realize it until you just mentioned it, but yeah, absolutely. I got to be like so hype about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been, with BC, it's been really hard because we're only supposed to work on it Monday nights. But the role player in me wants to write it right now.
Yes.
Oh my God. So hype. We
Yeah.
are so equally hype. And that's the tricky part, is that we're so equally hype. Like, and to hold ourselves back from telling this story is super hard.
Yeah, the way we work in my writing group is we work on the same document. We're trading off every couple lines. So I wake up every morning to a whole bunch of people being like, tag, 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 tag. And I get to wake up and see what happened next in the story. And the first thing I do when I wake up is type my responses.
Yeah, I have definitely been that place in my life. And I had to put that on hold so that I could release my book.
Yeah.
Because I just didn't have the time to do that anymore. I didn't have the time to RP at every drop of the hat.
Like, so liberating to have that be the work. These are books. I wake up and there's an extra 1,000 words in my book. I didn't write them. And it feels sometimes it feels so one-sided, like I'm getting so much out of this. And then I realize that I'm doing the same for other people. I'm letting them wake up. I stay up way later than my co-authors. So I'll write at night and they get to wake up to it. And then they wake up early and they write back to me. So there's this constant feeling like it's Christmas. And I have presents waiting every single day, or, every couple days, or however long it takes. I'm always slower at the beginning of novels than it speeds up later.
Sure.
But it is exciting and dynamic. And anytime that everyone feels like they're getting the best end of the deal, that's a great working relationship.
That's a great working relationship. I also come from a professional creative sort of background as well. And I don't believe in writer's block. I don't believe in artist block. I don't, because you have to formulate the skill to burst through those walls.
I've discovered what is my writer's block. My writer's block is my subconscious telling me that something is wrong in my story. There is a mistake. There is something intrinsically incorrect in the characterization or the choice someone made or the direction the story is going. And
I've totally been there.
100% of the time, every time I feel blocked, I go back, and at this point, I'm just like, oh, I feel blocked. Let me just start deleting things. And I just hit backspace until I suddenly want to write again.
To be honest, that's pretty much what I do too, is sometimes like I will write a whole chapter and then be like, this went a weird direction. And I think it would be better if this and this happened and then this happened.
Yep.
So I'll put this in a side thing.
Yep.
This will go to the side burner for a while.
My snippet folder is overflowing at all times.
Yep. And then you use that content later, but sometimes I'll just like split it open and do like an alternate universe. Like, this is a universe where she actually became a technocrat instead. Like, what's the worst thing that could happen?
With all my writing partners, we have headcanon folders.
Headcanon.
All the AUs that would have happened if something like the pairings that never happened. I ship characters in my own work so much, and they're very rarely the characters who are actually together in the work.
That is adorable.
So So we will just write these random asides that sometimes spawn whole other universes. Like, sometimes it's just like, okay, let's change up who these characters are a bit and rework them, and now let's just write this story.
Yeah.
Do it. But oftentimes it's just for fun. It's just like, okay, headcanon folder, I read these when I'm feeling down.
I'd miss that, actually. I used to do that too. And sometimes the alternate universe would become the primary universe.
Absolutely.
Just because I was just like, oh, this is way better. And then we do like another like 75,000 words.
Uh-huh.
That we have no idea where it's going.
That's the thing. It's this idea that have fun writing. Mm-hmm. Don't treat it like a job.
Don't
treat it professionally. Put in the hours. But you can be professional without it being a drag.
Yes. Wow. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Why the hell are you an artist if you're not having fun? It's not for the money.
It's not for the money. Why are you an artist? Well, I am like stunned. Like that is amazing.
Yeah, it's at least that's why I try to live by. I'm currently in a complete, like, I want to curl up under a rock and die and never type another word again phase. But that always happens right after I release a book, I've discovered. Because I'm in such an editing mode. I'll be editing and then doing, working with my proofreader and working with my editor. And I've just had, like, basically a whole bunch of professionals slap me upside the head and tell me, oh, you are awful. Look at all these mistakes you made. That gets me in the wrong mindset. That suddenly I'm looking at my work critically instead of positively. Right. And that's where my productivity goes to die. So I'm currently working on just cleansing my palette of editing by writing whatever it is that my heart desires. If I want to go off and write on my crazy little project that's off in a corner, I'm doing it. If I want to role play, I'm doing it. I just production, anything that I want to do. And usually after about half an hour of writing whatever I want to write, I want to work on my big projects because I'm actually passionate about them.
So I do exactly that. Like, it can be demoralizing when you get back, like, but I kind of welcome it because I'm very open to critique with my art. So I might as well open with my story building and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I'm probably going to stream with her here in a bit, but she, a dear friend of mine is, she was one of my beta readers and just had stellar feedback, like stuff that like the story really needed.
Yes.
Granted, I like compiled all of the critique and then I took a break and I drew for myself for a while. Like and which is something that happens so rarely. Like for me to draw something for myself is like so super rare. And I haven't been able to do it like with any kind of consistency for the past like 8-9 years. So like I just had a job for like 8 years doing a graphic novel and I lost the job in June. So ever since June, I've just been like, what do I do now? For myself?
It's hard. It's very difficult. Ever since publishing, and I've only been published since March, but now everything I write, I'm like, oh, can I publish this? And I'm having to like slap myself upside the head and be like, no, you're just writing it to write. Remember? That's what we do.
You don't have to monetize every
single thing you do.
And my husband has to remind me of that every once in a while. Like the idea that I'm selling my book He's like, you wrote the book for fun and you make it available for other people. The goal is not the money.
Yes.
Yeah, you monetized. You monetized the tarot deck. You monetized the comic books. You haven't monetized the music yet. You sort of monetized the dancing. Blah, 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 blah. Right?
You need to make money on one hand.
On one hand, you need to make money. On the other hand, you have to enjoy things.
Yes. Yes.
Have something that you enjoy. Like, I was a photographer for 7 years. A professional photographer. And when I stopped doing weddings and portraiture and, all of that wacky stuff, and started doing it for fun, like, I was doing all these fantastic, like, art projects that were, like, a year long and, 20 people deep, and, like...
You will always do better work if you enjoy what you're doing and you love what you're doing.
I had to re-find my love for photography because I noticed after 7 years my work was suffering. Like, it hadn't changed. I hadn't grown as a photographer. Like, as I was like going through my work and being like, this isn't a portfolio because everything looks the same. Like, you have to show how they're different and yet still on brand. Like, yeah. So
I have this year, like 2020 was my year. I decided, every single indie author group, every single piece of advice says stick to a genre, stick to a niche, stick to a trope. I said, no, that will kill me. That will be the end of me as a writer.
Sure.
Now, it would probably be the beginning of me as a successful author. You get that clear? It's good advice. On a marketing standpoint, it makes absolute sense. But I know myself, and my productivity just goes downhill if I
have the restriction.
Exactly. So I said, for 1 year, I'm going to throw that advice out the window, and I'm going to write whatever I want. And I published a epic fantasy, and I just published a arcane punk pirate heist.
Nice. I
wrote most of a lit RPG novel. I've written 2 fae romances. Like, I'm writing these just bizarre... I'm working on a little short novella world building currently about replicants on Mars getting a weird signal, and it's a weird mystery thriller on Mars. Nothing connects. It's all completely different genres. Like, I'll go from hard world building to soft world building to science fiction. And I think I've been producing my best work I've ever produced. Because I'm not trying.
I feel that way right now. Like, so this is an art book. Where it gives you prompts and then you draw within the prompt. And like, there's no real benefit to doing these other than they're fun.
Yeah.
And so I work in Procreate now on my iPad. So I just take a picture of the page, bring it into Procreate, and then I paint stuff. And I think it's some of the best work I've done in a really long time. Because I just got to a point where I had to premeditate everything I was drawing. I had to, so it was always like someone else's step and fetch it, you know? And then when I was finally my own step and fetch it, I was like, okay, I need on-brand stuff. Then I started doing on-brand drawing, and I'm loving it.
So this is my father's method for drawing, and I think it's fascinating. It's kind of how I approach books. He takes a blank piece of paper. He says, okay, I don't know what I'm going to draw.
Right.
And then he takes a pencil and an eraser, and he starts scribbling. Just random shapes, smudging, scribbles all over, and he scribbles for like half an hour with no direction, not drawing anything, just trying to create interesting, dynamic shapes. He has an eye for, the golden mean, for flow, for darks and shadows and all that, but there's nothing concrete. It's completely abstract.
Mm-hmm.
And then he puts the painting, the scribble on the wall. Mm-hmm. He steps back and he tries to find shapes in the cloud.
Right.
And if he can't find one, he turns it and tries to find shapes in the cloud. If he can't find it, he turns it. And the idea is that when he finds a shape, it means that it's already proportionally correct, or his mind wouldn't have seen it.
Right.
And so he draws these astonishingly interesting compositions where, the characters are all off on one side of this beautiful landscape and in the corners. And like, he has this really dynamic compositions because he didn't know what he was drawing when he started. And he wouldn't draw it if it wasn't correct based on the shapes that were already there.
Right.
And I take the same approach to any kind of creativity, is you cannot get lost if you don't know where you're going. If you are just trying your best to be creative and thoughtful at every stage, even before you know what you're doing, the end result will work.
It can.
That's the thing. I don't even think it can. I think it will. I've seen him do this hundreds of thousands of times, and it always works.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same way as you train yourself to recognize, you train yourself, for writing, you train yourself in 100 different tropes and 100 different stories. You get to know them so that you can recognize the story you're actually telling, so that you can write kind of without bounds, but still have that foundational craft knowledge and practice and skill to make the landing. Once you set yourself, you set your characters in an impossible position, and then you have the skill to write yourself out of it.
Because you're not thinking of it as writing yourself out of it. You're thinking of your characters basically like being guided by you, sure.
Well, but being who they are. If you build them correctly, you don't have to guide them. It's almost set in stone what they're going to do, even if you don't know it.
Right.
Because you're following the internal logic that you have created, and then it will there's a certain tipping point where you've created enough internal logic that they take on a life of their own, and what they do just happens.
Which, comes into weird, like, tulpa things.
Absolutely.
And egregores and all of that jazz, right? But that's another discussion.
Yes.
We are over the hour mark.
Yes.
But thank you.
Wow, I didn't even realize how much time it
was. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me today. The conversation was amazing.
Thank you for having me on.
And I do hope that this inspires my writers to role play and my role players to write more, and just that the two worlds collide. I hope that
they're all the same world. They just kind of are different continents, and occasionally we wave at each other.
And occasionally we wave at each other. All right. I think I'm going to wrap this up. If you would like to do your outro.
Sure. You can find my books on Amazon. It's Where Shadows Lie and NaCl Eye of the Storm. I also have a fun and exciting Discord full of role players and writers and such. So I will post the links down in the comments. We have a ton of fun. We're going to be doing NaNoWriMo, so it's going to be a hoot.
That's
and other than that, I'm everywhere. I'm on YouTube as Plot Mom. Almost every social media site is author Allegra, and yeah.
Awesome.
Check me out.
And I'm Sako Toomey, also known as Cass Voit. I just released a book, and on the 20th, and it is a cyberpunk / what else is it? Jeez.
You have me at cyberpunk. Anything that ends in punk is just like, gimme.
Well, it's technically Mage the Ascension, but it's got like government conspiracies and technology magic and like all of that stuff.
Love that kind of thing.
Super fun. I will probably put it in the description after this video. And if you are not partaking in Meadows karaoke right now, you totally should be. And we will catch you